Welcome to Horticulture. This is our first video lecture, and in it we're going to go over the four kingdoms and four different plant phyla. So be able to define what a domain is, that's a thing above a kingdom, be able to define a kingdom, and be able to define a phylum. And this will mainly be done by giving examples of each one of those. Be able to compare the three domains of life. Personally, I recommend you draw a Venn diagram. Be able to compare the four kingdoms of life. Again, a Venn diagram is helpful. And for these two objectives, you're going to have a lot of overlap with biology. If you have taken it, time to pull out those old notes. And if you haven't taken it, time to save these notes for when you do. Be able to compare the four phyla of plants. So that'll be mosses, ferns, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, and be able to identify a plant to a phylum. So if I give you the characteristics of a plant, I will expect you to be able to tell me if it's a moss, a fern, a gymnosperm, or an angiosperm. There are three domains in life. The first domain is bacteria, and most life is bacteria. These are single-celled organisms with no nucleus, no organelles, and they're found everywhere. The nucleus is simply a membrane-bound component that is going to hold the DNA. An organelle is a membrane-bound component within a cell that has a specific function. You're going to learn more about these in biology, and I will not be using those as vocabulary for horticulture. The domain Archaea, this is a special group that has a single cell, no nucleus, no organelles, and they're found in extreme environments, but they share other characteristics with that group we call Eukarya. The domain Eukarya are either single-celled or multi-celled. They have a true nucleus, so a membrane-bound component that has the DNA within it, and they have specialized organelles like mitochondria and sometimes chloroplasts. Now, within the eukaryotes, we're looking at the four kingdoms. First kingdom is the Protista. These are mostly single-celled organisms. You can find them in pond water. They do not have organs because, well, they're mostly single-celled. Now, I do want to point out that there is a group within the Protista that are called the algae. They have chloroplasts and they are photosynthetic, and they do have multiple cells. We are not covering them in horticulture, but they're very, very similar to the things we will cover. Animalia has muscle and nervous tissue, and they are multicellular. And in horticulture, we ignore those. Fungi, they have cell walls made of chitin, and they can be haploid or a special term called dikaryotic, which we don't discuss in this course because it's horticulture. We will have some intersections with fungi, but not a lot. And then there are the plants, the plant kingdom. They have chloroplasts. They have something called alternation of generations, which we're going to get into in Unit 2. They have spores that have sporopollenin, which we're not going to cover a lot, but this is why pollen is so hard to break, if you've ever tried to break a pollen grain. And they have cell walls made of cellulose. If you're writing this down on paper, that is cellulose from the cell walls of a plant. Now let's look in the different phyla of the plant kingdom. First off are the mosses, and these are haploid dominant, which means if you see something that has green on it and it is a moss, then that is only going to have one copy of the genome in each of their nuclei. That's haploid. We cover more of that in biology. There are no stems, no roots, and no leaves for mosses. Those little things you see are actually not vascular, so they don't have those specialized cells to move water in mosses. They have no seeds. They have no flowers. They have no fruits. So if they don't have roots, how do they anchor themselves to rocks? Well, they have something called rhizoids, which are these specialized little things that are not roots. They do not pull up water using these. They just anchor themselves. And mosses are short. The fern phylum, also known to nerds as the manilophytes. These are diploid dominant, so they are no longer haploid. That was only going to be mosses. These are diploid. They have true roots, true stems, true leaves. They are vascular plants. They have specialized cells to move water and to move sugars. And we're going to look into those more when we look into stems. Ferns do not make seeds. Ferns do not make flowers. Ferns do not make fruits. Ferns are generally taller than moss, but they are shorter than trees. Now, there are, of course, things called tree ferns, but those are pretty rare. The gymnosperm phylum. These are diploid dominant, just like ferns. They have true roots, true stems, true leaves. In fact, those stems can get huge. The tallest plants are gymnosperms. They have seeds, and you can eat these. These are these little pine nuts, are pine seeds. Gymnosperms do not make flowers. They do not make fruits. This includes the cycads, the conifers, and ginkgo plants. Ginkgos, although they have those fleshier leaves, those are actually gymnosperms just as much as your Douglas fir. Last, we have the angiosperms. Again, diploid dominant. They have true roots, true stems, true leaves, make seeds, and then especially have flowers and have fruit. There are 3 different groups of the angiosperms. There are the ancestral, the monocots, and the eudicots. We'll get into those later when we cover seeds, actually. It's going to be a while before we get into those. Now, we're going to look mostly in this class at angiosperms because those are cool. There are a lot of angiosperm families. And we're going to look mainly at 5 different groups within that are going to cover most of the horticulturally interesting plants. How do we tell them apart? Well, we're going to tell them apart by how their flowers look and how their fruit look. And in the following bits of this unit, I'm going to teach you those 5 families.